Farmer, cheesemaker, Eurosceptic obviously. He's familiar with EU regulations because of his history and background, and he has worked throughout EU member states, and he wants to share some information with you today about his experiences and with regard to regulations in his particular industry and some other points. So a warm welcome for Frank Shinnock, please.
Yeah, first, thanks for the invitation. And just a bit of an apology. I was hoping to have a PowerPoint to throw up what I'm talking about. And but anyway, we'll have to work without it. And yeah, the title of my talk is "Willful Waste Leads to Woeful Want." And my God, we're after getting a lot of it. In the last 40 years, it's been nothing but wasting our tax money. And this was a favourite saying of my mother. She died on the 1st of January this year. On the 27th of December, she spent 9 hours in a trolley. It's a kind of going rate for people now who go into hospital. And I find it appalling because the money is there. It's just been so badly mismanaged. And no one can say I'm into Europe. My wife is German, so that kind of covers me as being a pro-European. And we had a cheese business until the recession. When the Troika came over, they completely destroyed it. We had 3 people employed in Fermoy, making farmhouse cheese, and 2 students plus ourselves. And the austerity just finished everything, you know. The Troika didn't come over and tell us of all the public waste, every stupid regulation that came in. You have dead wood, drones going around. In Cork, we have another name from, you might like to hear, I call them wanker jobs. You know, people who are producing absolutely nothing and keeping people that are working, you know, making extra cost. It's just pathetic. So I decided, you know, at 65 that I'm going to do something about it, you know, and wake up, because people tell you, oh, you look after your own business and leave the politicians. But, 30 years of leaving politicians, we've seen the mess we're in. Most politicians in the Dáil, to me, they're just another version of Judas, a clone of Judas. You know, they've just sold us out and everything. It could be Fianna Filth, the Fianna Goons, the caviar socialists, and the green school teachers. You know, they all. And I have one very important thing to say at the end. They're all on this political expedient talk, you know. We have to talk, you know, they all have this nice talk about Brussels being so good for us, you know. It's good for them, but it's not good for our pockets, I can tell you. But they're not paying for it. So, everyone probably has a day or a time in their life that it's a big impression. And mine was in 1987. I've been through Checkpoint Charlie. And a lot of young people mightn't have heard about Checkpoint Charlie. And how many people have heard of Checkpoint Charlie? Right. I'm speaking to convince. So I went through Checkpoint Charlie with my wife, my girlfriend at the time. And she had to go through a different run. And it was a time tunnel, stepping 40 years back, you know. The train stations in West Germany, the taxis were Mercedes. In the East, we had these little Trabanti things, you know. But they didn't even paint the underground stations since World War II, and this was 1987. And I came out of that place, you know, saying, thanks be to God, you know, I'm rocking in the free world, you know. I really feel sorry for those people. And I give you an example, like if 2 people met in the street and the third person sort of came over to them, there'd be 5 people there because they think there's a queue for something. You had to queue for everything. And I was speaking to a guy in the Place de la République, which was the only place we would be allowed to eat as a foreigner. And it took actually about 3 hours before we got our dinner. We had to queue. But it was very noticeable, like the animal farm, the Politburo people and the army people, they didn't have to queue at all. But I met this engineer, and they allowed a bit of capitalism because the whole thing wasn't working. And so he was making batteries, and he was allowed to employ 1 person. And then he made a machine. He was able to turn out more because there was big demand for these batteries. And they came and they took it off him. Do you know what I mean? So I see now we're getting into this kind of a society in Europe and in Ireland, you know, where people at the top are telling us what we can and we cannot do, interfering in our lives, you know. So, things changed, you know, we were tiptoeing into totalitarianism very slowly, okay, and no one notices it after joining the EU. But after the mess trick, you know, I call it the mess trick, we're now leapfrogging into it, okay? And, you know, we voted no for Lisbon. It was the happiest day in my life, you know? And it was democracy denied. It was the same for Nice. We voted no, and it was democracy denied. And I will never forgive the 5% of the people for absolute cowardice for changing their vote, you know? It was absolute cowardice on the part of Irish people, of that 5% of Irish people. So, what have we got, like, you know? I wasn't surprised when the wall fell down 2 years later. What I was surprised was how it took so long that it didn't fall down, you know? And it was television that actually knocked the wall, you know? It wasn't newspapers. People saw West German television, you know? And in a way they probably thought Dallas was everywhere, you know? Because this is what they were looking at. And because they couldn't have a wall to stop television. And it was, you could actually get a car. And once you had your money saved up, you lodged your money, and 10 years later you got your car. It took that long. So you had to pay your money 10 years in advance, and you got your car. So this guy, he went in, he had his money, and he said, the guy said, come back in the 16th of February 2029, you get your car. He said, will I come in the morning or the evening? And the comrade said, the tough Irish, he said, does it really matter when you have to wait? Oh, it does, because the electrician is coming in the morning, you know? Yeah. Yeah. So, what? We've unelected people in Brussels, a kind of a Soviet-style system. And there's 15,000 lobbyists in Brussels. There's more lobbyists in Brussels than there is in Washington. And this is how things get done, the revolving door. Okay? And people aren't really familiar with this. You know, all this legislation, and the Common Agricultural Policy is one. I'm just going to talk about it in a minute. And so, like, we joined for free trade and we didn't get it, like, you know. But what we have in Ireland is we have an SS Gestapo, and these people have a different interpretation, right, of every bit of EU legislation. They have the most extreme interpretation of every bit of legislation in this country. And I've seen it as a cheesemaker. I was in England last year, and they wouldn't allow them to operate in the system. And it was grand, perfectly safe. But they, you know, they'd have to have stainless steel. They have to put you at the most cost, because in Ireland, we don't have duplication, but we have quadruplication, right? You know. And food is a good example. We have the Food Safety Authority. We have the Department of Agriculture. We have the Health Board. Those shaggers should be taking people off the trolley, you know, not looking after food, you know. And we have the county councils, and they're all answerable to one another, like, you know, and they're all pushing paper, and it's costing us a fortune. And then, you know, we have the Stasi then, and I had him recently, but I was kind of ready for him, and I talk about that if I get time later on, but I just move on because I'm limited to a little bit of time. It's hard to give a life story in 10 minutes, but people are now compliance is the word on agriculture at the moment. You have to be compliant. Okay, compliant leads to subservient. To be subservient, and subservient, they can force you to do the wrong thing. Every farmer in Ireland today is forced to feed GMO soya to their cows. I'm the only farmer in the country, probably, that's not feeding non-GMO. Okay, and I have to get it in England. There is no organic ration to be got in Ireland, the Green Island. You know, this is pathetic, like, you know. We joined Ireland in '73, and I figure out that we were working, ordinary people were working 1 day a week to pay tax. 1 day a week. And you could get to hospital. They weren't great, but you could get into a bed. Now, what happened? We had dirt tax. The Duke brought that in, Alan Dukes. A very kind of, has been to Brussels a lot with the IV. I mean, his background is Brussels. And it was kind of VAT, VRT, household capital acquisition tax, petrol going up all the time, drink, cigarettes, eco tax. Yeah, So if you have a new car in Ireland, if you can afford a Beamer, you have 120 euros. And if you have a banger, you're paying 500, okay? In Spain, it's the other way around. So, you know, it's the poor people are paying most of the tax. And there's hidden, we were promised harmony of living standards, but we have the highest insurance in the EU, and we have the highest bank charges. And, you know, we bailed the bastards out, and now they give us referral charges, like, to take more money off us again. Referral charges should be banned immediately. It's an awful bit of blackguarding. So, in agriculture, when we joined the agriculture EU, there was a Menschel plan, and so they had the CAP. And what the CAP is, everyone thinks it's a common agricultural policy, but it's not. It's a chemical agricultural policy. Yes. That's what it is. And it destroyed. We were all organic farmers, and we didn't even know it. And it destroyed organic farming. It created nitrogen pollution, right? And it's what other one? Oh yeah, and the nitrogen creates more weeds and more use of chemicals. So it has huge chemical contamination of food. Now, interesting enough, the Italians, they wanted to ban GMO soya and stuff because it's full of this thing called glyphosate. And I give it a 3/4 of an hour talk on glyphosate. I'm not going into today because everyone in this room today has glyphosate, which is the main ingredient in their urine, and no one's been told about this. We're in the worst food scare that ever hit mankind, believe me. But I'm not even going to talk about it. So the Italians anyway decided we're going to ban GMO, because if you're in the United States, every state can make its own regulation. If they want to have raw milk, they can have it. If they want to ban it, they can have it. There can be one state beside it have raw milk, the other state. And I think that's pretty good. But you can't in Europe. It's a Soviet control, So they told the Italians to back off, And the reason they told them to back off is because Bayer paid 59 billion, that's 9 noughts, for Monsanto last June. And we're going to see GMO grown in Europe, it's only a matter of maybe 2 or 3 years. Because they're not going to leave 56 billion parked. 56 billion would do a lot for the economy of this country, So, yeah, we have Origin Green, And Origin Green is a cover-up for Argentinian GMO soya and soya from Ohio. And this is what we're feeding our animals today. And this is what you're getting back in milk and in food, okay? And then you have quality assured, This is another way of forcing compliance to make subservient to do the wrong thing. People are now being forced from the top to do the wrong thing by big business. So, we had BSE, so they brought in the herd policy. Anyone heard of the herd policy? No. So you're feeding meat and bone meal. All the cows, well, not all the cows, a lot of cows had this prion for BSE. So the obvious thing, if you ask a child of 5 what you do, you get rid of all the old cows. But what did they do? No. They kept all the old cows and they got rid of calves. The herd of bull calves. Such a waste of taxpayers' money and such a complete. To me, it's immoral to do what they did. So, like in Ireland, we had the beef tribunal. Then we had dioxin scare. Food came back from 35 different countries, and we had to pay for it. And it tarnished our reputation. And then we had, foot and mouth, and we had horse DNA, and people mistakenly call it horse meat. But I'm in the food industry, and I'm farming for a long time. And when someone tells me this horse DNA, it doesn't say horse meat to me. What it says is offal. And this is what was going into burgers, like offal. And no one, it was horse DNA, but it wasn't horse meat, I can tell you. And the same people in the beef tribunal were the same people using it in Ireland again. And sure, wasn't Coveney's brother as well, our local man, wasn't he one of the companies, Sugar beet. And he closed the sugar beet factory, which was perfectly viable, he handed it over to the French. Thanks very much, we give him a round of applause. And, talking about the sugar beet, we had Éireann Foods. How many people remember Éireann Foods? Yeah. 2 people. It was going concern. And then they got Sir Dr. Tony to run it, okay? And he said it was only economical. And a month later, He was the managing director of Heinz in America. Nice one, Tony, nice one. That was a good one. That was a good scoop. Yeah. So, yeah. So that's. Then they have this single farm payment. I call it Stalin farm policy because they brought in a huge waste of money, costing millions. Satellite photographs. You wouldn't want to be out in the field shedding a tear for the old sod, I tell you, because you're picked up on it, okay? And this is costing millions. It's a complete waste of money. This would keep your mother and my mother off a trolley. Any day, I can tell you, would keep them off a trolley, And what is really this for? This is for the Franco-German army, because now they have a map of every place in Europe, okay? Yeah. And what a waste of money, So what they're doing now is it's a thing called the Pareto principle. So 80% of the money is going to 20% of the farmers, okay? These are mainly tillage farmers. 50% of this, 35% of the EU budget going to agriculture, okay? It's supposed to be agriculture. It's going to the pharmaceutical industry. 20% of it, the 80% that this 20% gets, 80% of what they get goes to the pharmaceutical industry. And you're getting it back in the bread and in the beer. I tasted Guinness lately, 30 nanograms of glyphosate Roundup inside in Guinness. Thanks very much. So you're all getting it back. So I'm coming near the end of it now because I'm dragging it. So what the wake-up call for me was the nitrate directive. Sounded a good idea, all these things sound like a good idea, but there's always, with the 15,000 lobbies, there's always, and the revolving door, there's always another agenda, And but it was a wake-up call for me because today there's more nitrogen used than before this directive came in. But what it did is it completely destroyed organic type of agriculture, okay? Because it's ludicrous, okay? From Cork to Cavan, I had cows out this year on the 11th of January. In Cavan, they'd be lucky to get them out on the 11th of April. And that's only 150 miles here. But to make a directive to cover Lapland to Gibraltar, lads, these guys, they're fucking idiots, excuse my French, So I call it, so they have a directive, so they have to have an office in Berlin. And I call it the kamikaze economics. So 80 million people in Berlin, or in Germany, and you have an office in Berlin. 70 million people in France, you have an office in Paris. 65 in England, you have an office in London. You get down to Portugal. 13 million in Portugal, and you have an office in Lisbon. And you come to Hibernia, the land of the sleeping, as the Romans call it, and we want to wake up 3.5 million people at the time. The cost per head of this country to implement a EU directive is phenomenal. Okay, phenomenal. It's absolute, and they will have a more extreme interpretation in top of it here then, which makes it extremely worse for ordinary people. So this is kamikaze economics, and to add insult to injury and put salt in the wound, our top civil servants, our top boys, are earning more in Dublin than the guys in Berlin. Jesus, we don't want to wake up. They're earning more in Dublin than they are in Berlin. One of the reasons I give this talk, a friend of mine committed suicide after one of these single farm payments. It was just too much for him. And they had a minute silence in Brussels 2 years ago for all the farmers that committed suicide in France. It was very nice of them, because they were the cause of it. It was their policies was the cause of it, forcing small farmers out of business. Yes. So what's the solution? Because I'm, when you get to 60, you start doing navel gazing, and the solution, the Irish government and the EU is a house of cards. It's fed, okay? It's fed on our tax. It has an insatiable appetite to waste it. So what we have to do, and what this organisation has to do, because it's the only one, none of the rest of them, we have to say, we're cutting tax. We're cutting tax. Cut it by 50%. Cutting all these ones, I was hoping I'd have them up on the screen. It's an array of new taxes, We're going to cut taxes. We're going to cut... When we joined the EU, we had a civil service, okay? And now we have an uncivil public sector. We have a lot of wanker jobs, and we need to offload them. They'd be better off on the dole, We need to offload them And we need to stop being, and ordinary people, you know, and this is why they have a cheap food policy, because if they can get people to eat shit, you know, in other words, and that's what I call it, like, contaminated food, and you walk into any supermarket today, right, and you walk into Lidl, or Aldi, and you walk into Lidl and Aldi, the same company in Germany, like, and you get a whole array of organic. You'll get 3 things organic here, you know, because we are the most, we are hibernating, we're in hibernation, okay? Oh yeah. Yeah, only little people pay taxes. I was talking to his American friends here a while ago. This is what a lady, a millionairess in New York, told the judge from the Internal Revenue in New York, right? But she was in the wrong country. She should have been in Ireland and she'd have been correct. So, some of you might remember Haughey, you know, and he brought in this bit of legislation, zero tax for writers. And I know a writer who was living beside me. He was Austrian, meter, and very nice guy. So he was paying no tax. And he had to stay so many days in Ireland, he had no tax to pay in Austria, okay? Very nice one, okay? And Donovan came in at the time, films and all that, okay? But it was a cover-up. It was a complete cover-up for stallion fees. So you take a stallion, right? Take one of the top ones, 100,000 a jump, okay? 3 jumps a day, right? 3 to 4 months jumping. Add that up, zero tax. I tell you, I'm fairly upset about it. And these people then, they can buy up every cottage acre from here to Feathered, okay? Because they're paying no tax, like. And the rest of us, we're screwed with tax, like. It's about, we had the whole lot of them. Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Labour, Greens, they all know this existed, okay? And it's time to put a stop to it. Let them pay 10% tax. Let them, you know, and that's a small amount, you know? They can afford to do that. And that'll keep your mother and my mother off the trolley in hospital. And this is the last thing. I was hoping this would be up on the slide. This was a photograph of what the bastards are up to in the Gestapo in Dublin, right? They went out and they shot a guy, shot all his scouts below in Liscarroll. And because they have this TB propagation scheme. It started in 1956. It's been the biggest single waste of taxpayers' money in this country by a mile, and there's no one talking about it. So you have the people who benefit most, okay, department vets. They're on huge, serious, they're on massive wages, okay? They are supposed to be eradicating. They are the people who benefit more by its maintenance. We have to take it off them. It has to be taken off them. You can't have people who are benefiting. They're not going to eliminate it. And after 45 years, you know, if it was in any private sector, they'd be gone well bust by now. But, you know, our tax money keeps feeding them, you know. And I find it pathetic. It's time to go, yeah. I find it pathetic that you have cows about a month to calve going in with a calf inside them and they're chopped. The calf goes into the... This is immoral, you know. So what have I to final to say? Yeah, the tail is wagging the dog, you know, and we want to give this dog a kick in the arse fairly fast, like, because if we don't, I am very concerned what we're going to have is chaos. If we leave it go much further, we're going to have chaos, and we will be very sorry. Thanks.